Well, well, well. Look who rose from the ruins with fire in their eyes and steel in their spine. Welcome back to the ghost they thought they'd exorcised. Welcome to the consequence they pretended wouldn't catch up. Welcome to the person you became when they pushed you past breaking, shattered every promise, and walked away assuming you'd stay buried. Welcome to the version of yourself that lives in their nightmares now. They can't believe what they're seeing, can they? Standing there with their jaws on the floor like they've witnessed something impossible, because this wasn't part of their plan. You were meant to crumble, stay silent, remain small enough to control. Instead, here you are, moving through their reality like a reckoning they can't ignore. And the part that destroys them, the part that keeps them lying awake at dawn, scrolling through evidence of your existence, is knowing they built you. Every act of betrayal became your education. Every time they left became your training ground. Every lie they spread about you was just another chapter in the instruction manual you wrote on never being vulnerable like that again. They believed they were destroying you, dismantling you piece by piece until nothing remained except apologies and compliance. But what they were actually doing, what their arrogance made them blind to, was constructing something they should have been terrified of from day one. You know the exact moment, don't you? That precise instant when something fundamental inside you broke free. Not fragile like glass, not sudden like breaking bones, but deliberate, like a chain that had been restraining something primal and patient for too long. There was no drama, no explosions, no tears, no spectacle for witnesses. It happened in silence, in precision, the kind of rupture that occurs in darkness when nobody's there to see. And you understood with absolute clarity that your gentleness no longer belonged to them. Your justifications didn't belong to them. The version of yourself that prioritized their comfort while you hemorrhaged inside didn't belong to them anymore. They had been siphoning you dry for months, possibly years, extracting pieces of your spirit, your faith, your light. And every time you requested basic dignity, basic truth, basic humanity, they stared at you like you were demanding the impossible. So you stopped requesting. And that shift changed everything. Because the second you stopped needing their approval was the second you transformed into something they couldn't dominate, couldn't anticipate, couldn't manipulate with the recycled tactics they deployed on everyone else who obeyed. You didn't simply leave them. You abandoned the entire framework that produced them. The unwritten rules insisting you stay kind, stay forgiving, give people endless opportunities to wound you identically. Now they're observing you from whatever safe distance they established before you became too radiant to witness directly, and they're desperately trying to decode it, attempting to reverse engineer how the person they dismissed evolved into someone they can't stop obsessing over. They investigate your life like detectives at a crime scene, searching for evidence, hunting for vulnerability, desperate for any indication that you're still the same person they convinced themselves you were. But everything they discover only confirms what paralyzes them with fear. You transcended their understanding completely. You're not participating in the same competition anymore. You're not even in the same universe. They watch you navigate existence with a confidence that doesn't beg for validation, a clarity that refuses to apologize for seeing through deception, a presence that doesn't diminish when they walk into the room. And something inside them fractures because they're realizing, perhaps for the first time in their miserable existence, that choices carry weight, that you can't construct your kingdom on someone else's destruction without eventually confronting what you created. You're not their victim now. You're not their experiment. You're not their emotional punching bag, disguised as friendship or romance or family obligation. You're the nightmare they whispered warnings about, the possibility they swore could never happen. They're asking everyone these days, anyone willing to listen, what happened to them? How did they transform so quickly? When did they become so untouchable? But notice how they never ask the actual question, the one requiring them to confront their reflection and acknowledge every selfish choice they made. They don't want to understand what they did to you. They want to figure out how to reverse what you've become, how to force you back into the container where you were predictable, explainable, manageable. But that container, the one they constructed with your silence and your accommodation and your desperate hunger to be loved by people incapable of love, that container is dust now. You incinerated it yourself with every tear you shed in isolation, with every night you endured that should have annihilated you, with every moment you chose yourself when the world screamed. That was unforgivable selfishness. They can't comprehend that kind of metamorphosis because metamorphosis demands pain, and they've dedicated their entire existence to avoiding pain, numbing it, projecting it onto others, blaming everyone except themselves for the void that stalks them like a shadow. You didn't flee from your pain. You sat in it. You allowed it to educate you. You weaponized it until it stopped being agony and became your ammunition. Here's what haunts them through sleepless nights. Here's what devours them from within while they perform normalcy. They know they possessed something authentic with you, something extraordinary, whether labeled friendship or love or family, or whatever convenient term they applied to avoid confronting the depth of what it actually was. You appeared for them. Genuinely appeared. Not conditionally, not transactionally, but with sincere care that didn't calculate or demand reciprocity or require constant affirmation to survive. You existed for them in ways most humans never experience in a lifetime. And they took that. They took your devotion and your authenticity and your ability to recognize their potential, even when they didn't earn it. And they discarded it like trash, like something replaceable, like they could always circle back later when convenience struck, and you'd still be there with open arms and an endless capacity for forgiveness. But you're not there anymore, and that's the twist in the narrative they never anticipated. They mistook your love for fragility. They assumed your kindness meant you had no edges. They were catastrophically, irreversibly wrong, so devastatingly incorrect that the realization is dismantling them in slow motion. They deployed every manipulation strategy in existence, didn't they? Every control mechanism available. The guilt disguised as caring. The gaslighting wrapped in affection. The silent treatment when you needed basic communication. The triangulation, where they poisoned others against you, just to isolate you further. They played strategic mind games while you were attempting to have honest dialogue. And temporarily, it succeeded. Wondered if perhaps you were too emotional, too difficult, too whatever they needed you to believe to avoid accountability for their behavior. But eventually, and this is the magnificent part, the part that makes your transformation permanent, you stopped absorbing their projections. You stopped accepting responsibility for their inability to function as decent humans. You stopped contorting yourself into agonizing positions just to occupy spaces never designed for you. The moment you perceived them accurately, without the distortion of hope or history or desperation, the moment you saw them for precisely what they were, people who extracted and extracted and extracted until nothing remained, and then performed confusion about why you finally shut the door. That was your liberation moment, and that freedom, that's untouchable, uncorrupted, irretrievable by them. Now witness what happens when someone who's been shattered learns to reconstruct themselves without seeking permission from the people who caused the destruction. You didn't pursue healing to become more acceptable to them. You pursued healing to immunize yourself against their methods. You didn't invest in growth to reclaim them. You invested in growth to guarantee you never tolerate that level of disrespect again from anyone. Every boundary you establish now stands on the foundation of every boundary they violated. Every standard you maintain now is reinforced by every instance they persuaded you to compromise your standards for their convenience. They transformed you into someone who doesn't distribute second chances like confetti, who doesn't justify their choices to people incapable of comprehension anyway, who doesn't remain in dynamics that compromise their tranquility. And now they want to protest. Now they want to perform victimhood and broadcast to anyone listening that you've changed, that you're unrecognizable, as if that's an indictment instead of the greatest unintentional compliment they could offer. They're attempting to progress, attempting to persuade themselves they're indifferent, publishing posts about evolution and fresh starts and wisdom gained. But their eyes reveal a contradictory narrative every time your name surfaces. Every time someone references you casually, every time they accidentally encounter something you've accomplished or become or achieved without their involvement, there's this flicker, this fraction of a second where the facade cracks and you witness it. The remorse they costume as apathy, the devastation they pretend is freedom, the persistent recognition that they fumbled something irreplaceable. And no quantity of new connections or clean slates will ever fill that particular absence. You're not their biggest error, you're their greatest casualty. And the distinction matters because errors provide lessons. Casualties haunt you permanently. They pursue you into every subsequent relationship, where you find yourself making comparisons. Every new connection where something feels imperceptibly wrong. Every silent moment where you question what your existence would resemble if you hadn't been so devoted to your own ease that you sacrificed someone else's dignity. But here's what they'll never grasp about monsters like you, the ones they manufactured with their nenection and brutality and casual devastation. You don't crave vengeance. You've evolved past that. Revenge requires you to still value their perspective, to still need them to comprehend their damage, to still be emotionally tethered to their admission of wrongdoing. You occupy different territory now, territory where their existence doesn't register in your daily calculations, where their apologies, if they ever construct the words, would hold zero meaning. Because apologies don't erase harm, they just alleviate the guilt of the person apologizing. You've transcended the necessity for closure from people who couldn't offer you honesty. Beyond the craving for vindication from people who will never confess fault. Beyond the illusion that someday they'll awaken and recognize what they lost and return groveling with authentic remorse. Even if they did, especially if they did, you'd regard them with the same passing interest you'd grant a stranger passing by and continue walking. Because the person they're apologizing to no longer exists. That version of you perished in the flames they ignited, and what emerged from those ashes doesn't understand their language. They're watching you flourish now, watching you construct a reality that excludes them, doesn't require them, doesn't even acknowledge them except as a footnote in your creation story. The antagonist that made the protagonist necessary. Every achievement you claim feels like a personal assault to them because it demonstrates you didn't need their endorsement, their validation, their existence in your world to become something remarkable. You accomplished it regardless. You accomplished it in spite of them. You accomplished it with the kind of resolve that only emerges from having no alternative except self-rescue. They want to claim credit somehow, want to assert they propelled you toward excellence through their absence. But that's not the mechanism. They didn't propel you, they attempted to inter you. And the fact that you flourished anyway, that you converted their cemetery into your sanctuary, that's entirely you. That's your fortitude, your resilience, your refusal to allow their worst to determine your best. You're the proof that obliterates their fiction, the living testimony that they weren't essential to your journey, just an obstruction you overcame en route to becoming who you were destined to be. And now arrives the haunting, not physical, not visible, but psychological, energetic. The kind of haunting that manifests when someone realizes belatedly that they weren't the dominant force they presumed. You're not pursuing them. You don't need to. You're simply existing at a frequency they can't access but can't stop reaching for. Every action you take reverberates in their awareness. Every boundary you enforce reminds them of every boundary they demolished. Every standard you uphold illuminates every way they disappointed. You've become their benchmark. The monster they created is silent, concentrated, constructing something so far beyond their comprehension that by the time they recognize what's occurring, you're already unreachable, untouchable, functioning in dimensions they can't access because they never invested the effort to heal, to expand, to become someone deserving of those dimensions. You're not superior because you're flawless. You're superior because you chose to become better. You took your suffering and alchemized it into purpose instead of transferring it to the next person. You examined your wounds and decided they would terminate with you instead of becoming an inherited curse you pass to everyone you encounter. That's the distinction between people who evolve and people who simply age. You didn't merely survive their treatment. You fundamentally transformed because of it. And transformation is permanent, irreversible. The kind of change that rewrites your entire foundation. They observe you now and they don't recognize you. Not because you've altered superficially, but because your energy is different. Your frequency is different. The way you navigate existence carries a gravity they can't identify but absolutely sense. You're not performing confidence, you inhabit it. You're not pretending indifference, you genuinely don't care. And that authenticity, that unshakable rootedness in who you are and what you will and won't accept. That's what makes you terrifying to people who still exist in disguises, who still hide from themselves, who still require external validation to feel substantial. You became the kind of person who unsettles others simply by refusing to participate in the games everyone else plays. By communicating directly when others communicate in riddles. By departing when others would remain and endure. By prioritizing your peace over their comfort without apology or explanation. That's not cruelty. That's not heartlessness. That's sovereignty. That's self-respect. That's what materializes when someone finally comprehends they don't owe anyone access to their energy, their time, their presence. Especially people who demonstrated repeatedly they don't value those things. The shock they're experiencing, that's not about you changing. That's about their illusion of you disintegrating. They maintained this construct in their minds of who you were, this controllable, predictable, manageable version they could utilize and discard whenever it suited them. And you demolished that construct by simply being truthful about who you actually are. what you actually require, what you'll actually accept. They're not shocked by your transformation. They're shocked by their own delusion, by how completely they misread you, by how thoroughly they underestimated what you were capable of when driven past your threshold. You offered them every opportunity to treat you properly, every chance to choose differently, every warning that circumstances couldn't persist the way they were. And they dismissed all of it, convinced you'd always be available, always forgive, always accept less than you deserved because you'd done it for so long already. Their shock is the sound of consequences materializing, the universe reconciling ledgers, karma wearing your face, and their regret. Here's what the monster they created understands that they'll never comprehend. Power isn't loud, isn't violent, isn't constantly defending itself or proving itself or proclaiming itself. Authentic power is quiet, certain, unmoved by other people's chaos or judgments or manipulation attempts. Authentic power is knowing who you are so completely that external circumstances can't disturb you, can't define you, can't determine your value or your trajectory or your peace. You discovered that power in the wreckage they left you in. You constructed it from the fragments of trust they violated, the pieces of heart they shattered, the parts of yourself you had to recover from places they abandoned you.